At the end of the day, she turned to me and said, "Wow, today has been just such a mentally engaging conversation. I feel like I never talk like this with any of my other friends." That day, we didn't talk about anything monumental. No deep, dark secrets were spilled. We simply talked about life, about the world around us. We asked questions and more questions, unrestricted by the norms that tend to dictate our social conversations. Our society has built a go-to box of conversation starters for small talk, from the weather to our weekend plans. We compartmentalize things and then brush them off. Sure, surface-level questions establish compatibility, but only genuine, organic conversations can build trust. Too many times have I witnessed the following situation. In class, we have an intriguing, riveting, lively discussion. People ask insightful questions and speak with passion and conviction. And yet the moment we step out of class, a switch flips, and we revert to our everyday social jargon. We are slow to explore our intellectual curiosity outside of the classroom. Our static, calculated conversations consequently inhibit the growth of our personal relationships. A study from the University of Missouri reports that we spend about 70 to 80% of our waking hours engaged in some form of communication, whether that be reading, writing, speaking, or listening. So here you can see that communication, by definition, is reciprocal. It's a two-way street, or at least it's supposed to be. And yet in the last decade, America is seeing two interconnected problems. As shown by the data from the Pew Research Center, our society is becoming increasingly polarized, as more and more Americans lean toward extreme ideologies and do not identify as moderates. This polarity has created a divide in our political discourse, in person and online, and it's pushing us into opposite corners of a wrestling match that never ends. In light of such a contentious and divisive presidential election, the Wall Street Journal published an online interactive graphic called Blue Feed, Red Feed. Facebook scientists followed the activity of millions of social media users and found that we almost exclusively like, comment, and share posts that align with our own political views. This is not unexpected. We like people that agree with us, and the predictability of this research is the exact reason why changing our political discourse is necessary. We cannot keep using social media or any public forum as a portal into a unilateral dimension where ideas are simply boomeranged around in a bubble. So if we spend all of this time communicating, why are we stuck in lackluster conversations? Why are we stuck in echo chambers? Understandably, there is a natural sense of vulnerability and fragility that comes with any more personal or political conversation. But perhaps one reason why we are hesitant to engage in intellectual conversations is the prevalence of censorship and the stigma of political correctness. Across our country, there has been an ongoing, heated debate about intellectual safe spaces, trigger warnings, and free speech at college campuses like the University of Chicago. Our own school community recently made national news when history teacher Frank Navarro was placed on administrative leave in the interest of the emotional safety of the students. Outraged social media statuses, campus protests, op-eds, even our own school board meetings reveal the undeniable fracture in the web between administration, faculty, and students at many institutions nationwide. So this dilemma begs another question. How do we filter ideas and decide what is taboo or not? How do we address intellectual diversity and academic freedom? How do we define the parameters of our conversations, if at all? As individual speakers and thinkers, it is important that we establish a balance between our personal advocacy and our respect for other perspectives. And as listeners in a collective society, we should refrain from stepping into the quicksand of political correctness and hypersensitivity. Understanding and embracing this duality of intellectual communication is the catalyst for productive, meaningful discourse and deeper mutual relationships. In philosophy, intellectualism is often considered synonymous to rationalism. Yet with the rhetoric that people employ today, it is unrealistic to be exclusively rational. One way that we can incorporate emotion into our discourse is through empathy. We are so lucky to live in a country where the fundamental laws like the First Amendment allow us to speak our minds. And so we should take advantage of that without renouncing the rights of others. So what does this look like? I have a few steps toward reshaping our lens on both sides of intellectual communication, the 3 E's. Number 1, expose. We need to ask questions, get informed, do our research, visit websites, authors, and publications that we normally wouldn't. We can't be afraid to put our ideas out there, but when we do present them, it is imperative that we do not begin with, the other side is wrong, and here's why. Then what's the point of even sharing? By assuming that our idea or opinion is definitely superior or absolutely right, we reject any prospect of collaborative, open discussion, and we inhibit actual progress and productivity. Number 2, engage. In order to truly achieve our desired goals and objectives, we need to engage and actually listen. There's a common phrase that goes something like, listening is not just waiting for your turn to speak. This completely rings true in any type of conversation, social, intellectual, political. Engagement requires respect, and when it comes to language, there is a fine line between consciousness of vocabulary and nitpicking rhetoric for every possible offense. Shutting down, scolding, or slandering someone for misspeaking with the broad blanket reasoning of political correctness often implies a superiority complex. Rather, we should ask for clarification and then transition into an open, composed explanation of our viewpoints. But there is also a fine line between feeling uncomfortable and unsafe, which brings me to my final point, empathize. Honestly, up until this past election, I had never fully understood sectionalism. We had learned about it in history class, but my naive mind was always lost at the idea that people would not want to be unified as one nation. It was only until a recent, spontaneous trip through rural California when I began to witness how shockingly different the lifestyles and values are in each pocket of our nation. And then I could empathize with other people's daily lives and see how that shapes their political views and social norms. It was slightly uncomfortable, but it was also eye-opening. By empathizing with others, we can understand why certain words might make them feel unsafe, words that carry serious weight and tragic history. To truly create an effective solution, or to build a deeper relationship, or to simply gain a greater understanding, we have to put ourselves in other people's positions. I don't have all of the answers toward healing the greater divide that separates our country. Our ideological differences are often intertwined along threads like race and socioeconomic background. And I acknowledge that this is not a perfect formula for revitalizing our relationships, but I do know that the way we are going to reach progress, depth, and unity is through discourse. Even if we cannot, or it is difficult, to combat the institutionalized oppression of voices, we can start with ourselves, on the smaller scale of our everyday lives. Our internal willingness to listen is a crucial stepping stone in the right direction. It is our responsibility as constructors of the future to boldly go, to foster an environment that conducts ideas rather than insulates them. One of my favorite authors, James Baldwin, wrote in his book, Notes of a Native Son, "It is really quite impossible to be affirmative about anything one refused to question." So I challenge you to question and to be genuinely open to hearing an answer. Thank you.